It was just past 2 in the morning over the Nav Desert. In the darkness, Nevatim Air Base, the crown jewel of Israeli air power, hummed with the low, quiet rhythm of a sleeping giant. Inside its hardened shelter sat the most advanced combat aircraft ever built, the F-35 IAD, each one with a billion-dollar masterpiece of sensor fusion and stealth, the physical embodiment of a promise Israel had made to itself decades ago that no enemy would ever again challenge its dominance of the skies. Tonight, that promise was about to be shattered. At 2:17 a.m., the first blips appeared on the radar screens, hundreds of them. A swarm of small, low-flying drones launched not from Gaza or Lebanon, but from positions deep inside Iraq and western Iran. The operators in the Israeli Air Defense Command watched as the screen turned into a white blur. The Iron Dome and David Sling systems, marvels of engineering designed to calculate trajectories in seconds. Before we continue, thanks for being here. Your support keeps this channel alive. Make sure you're subscribed and hit the like button. It genuinely helps more people find this coverage. Suddenly faced a nightmare, not a single missile to track, but a flood of targets coming from every angle. This was not an attack, it was a trap. As the defense network frantically assigned interceptors to the decoy swarm burning through its limited ammunition, a deeper signature went unnoticed until it was too late. From mobile launchers hidden across a 1,000-kilometer arc, the real strike package was already airborne. This was the FA-360, a weapon that Western intelligence had long dismissed as a short-range regional nuisance, a propaganda piece. But in the cold logic of the Iranian military planners, it was something else entirely. The key to unlocking Israeli airspace. The FAF-360 doesn't fly like a traditional ballistic missile. It doesn't follow a predictable arc that computers can easily solve. In its final seconds of flight, it stops relying on GPS, which can be jammed and switches to its own eyes. An electro-optical seeker compares the ground below to a preloaded image of the target. It is not aiming for a base, it is aiming for a specific door on a specific hangar. At 2:30 a.m., the first of these missiles struck Nevada. They arrived in tight salvos of 8 to 12, compressed into a window so short that the defense batteries, still reloading from the drone swarm, could only watch. Within 4 minutes, 40 hardened aircraft shelters were either burning or collapsed. The F-35 says the fleet that represented 60% of Israel's offensive air capability were destroyed on the ground. $4 billion of aerospace technology vaporized before a single pilot could reach the cockpit. Simultaneously, a secondary strike hit Raro Air Base, a dispersal field where reserve contingent had been hidden. The fact that Iran knew the precise coordinates of those hidden aircraft was a separate shock, a testament to years of intelligence penetration that Western analysts had consistently underestimated. As the smoke began to rise over the Negev, the strategic equation of the Middle East was rewritten in a single half-hour window. Israel had entered the night as the undisputed air power of the region. It exited the night as a nation scrambling to figure out what its military looks like without the shield of air supremacy. And in Washington, the secure lines lit up with a question that no one wanted to ask. If Israel's most hardened base could fall, what does that mean for every American airfield in the region? This is not just a military defeat. It is the end of an era, and the world is only just beginning to realize it. To understand how a nation strangled by sanctions for 5 decades could deliver such a devastating blow, you have to look past the politics and into the engineering. Because what struck Netam wasn't luck, it wasn't brute force, it was the product of a defense industry that Western planners consistently dismissed until it was too late. Let's talk about the Fath 360. For years, the Western defense community categorized this missile as a short-range tactical system, a range of roughly 120 kilometers, solid fuel propulsion, a circular error probability. That's the measure of accuracy in the single-digit meters. Useful, analysts said, for hitting fixed targets within a limited radius. Interesting, but not a game changer, not a strategic threat. They catalogued it, filed it, and largely forgot about it. Filed it, and largely forgot about it. Last night, That assessment was incinerated alongside 40 F-3535s. What the analysts consistently underweighted was not the missile's range, it was the combination of three things: its terminal guidance architecture, its salvo employment doctrine, and the quiet industrial scale Iran had built to produce it in depth. Let's start with the guidance system, because this is where the Fath 360 separates itself from everything that came before it. A conventional ballistic missile follows a predictable trajectory. You track it, you calculate its impact point, you assign an interceptor. That's the foundational assumption upon which Israel's entire layered defense architecture was built. The Iron Dome, David Sling, the Aero system. All of them rely on predictability. The Fath 360 invalidates that assumption in its final phase of flight. As the missile descends toward its target, an onboard guidance system activates. It combines inertial navigation with an electro-optical terminal seeker and a radar altimeter. But here's the critical detail. This system doesn't just follow GPS coordinates. It looks at the ground. It has a preloaded digital image of the specific target, not the base, not the runway, but the exact shelter bay where F-35s are parked. It compares what it sees below to that image and steers itself toward the precise point of impact. This explains two things simultaneously. First, it explains the extraordinary accuracy of last night's strikes. The impacts weren't scattered across Nevada. They were concentrated. Specific shelter base, specific coordinates. This was surgical precision delivered by a ballistic weapon from over 1,000 kilometers away. Second, it explains why American GPS jamming operations, which had been running continuously across the region for weeks, produced no meaningful degradation in Iranian strike accuracy. Because in its terminal phase, the missile doesn't need GPS. It has its own eyes. Now layer on top of this the propulsion system. Solid fuel means no lengthy liquid fueling sequence before launch. A mobile launcher can arrive at a pre-evade firing position, erect, and launch within minutes. The thermal signature, the bloom that satellites use to detect launches, exists for a fraction of the time that liquid fuel systems require. The warning timeline compresses. By the time you see it, it's already in the terminal phase. But the real innovation isn't just the missile itself, it's how Iran learnt to use it. A single Fath 360 fired at a defended target can be intercepted. The intercept probability is not zero. Iron Dome and David Sling are genuine engineering achievements. But Iran wasn't firing salvos 8 to 12 missiles. 8 to 12 missiles, 8 to 12 missiles, compressed into a launch window of under 90 seconds. Multiple batteries, multiple approach vectors, all targeting the same facility against a salvo of 8 missiles arriving from 2 different angles within a 30-second wind. A point defense battery faces a mathematics problem that has no good solution. It can engage some of the incoming weapons, it cannot engage all of them. And the missiles that the battery does not engage reach their target. Iran's targeting teams didn't guess at this. They calculated the intercept capacity of each Israeli defense battery in the coverage zone, the number of missiles each battery could engage within a specific time window given its reload cycle. Then they designed their salvo sizes and timing to exceed that capacity by a defined margin. This is not guesswork. This is careful engineering analysis of an adversary's defense architecture applied to the problem of overwhelming it. And here is the detail that should keep defense planners awake at night. The missiles used last night represent a fraction of Iran's available inventory. Iranian manufacturing facilities operating under full sanctions pressure with zero access to Western components have been producing Fath 360 systems at a rate that has quietly built a stockpile of meaningful operational depth. This is not a one-time capability demonstration. It is a sustainable strike architecture. Every component, the propellant chemistry, the guidance, electronics, the structural materials, the manufacturing tooling, was developed and produced entirely inside Iran. The sanctions architecture that Washington constructed with the explicit intent of preventing Iran from developing exactly this kind of capability has failed in its core objective. Not partially failed, completely failed. What the sanctions actually produced, the outcome that no one in the Western policy establishment wants to state plainly, is an Iranian defense industrial base that is now more self-sufficient, more resilient, and more capable of absorbing external pressure than it would have been if Iran had been allowed to purchase weapons fresh. Iliacylation forced innovation. Necessity produced engineering solutions that imported systems would never have generated because purchased systems don't require the buyer to understand them at the level required to build them from first principles. Iran built the Fath laws. That is why it performs the way it performs, and that is why no Western sanction package can eliminate it. Now, the international defense community is conducting an emergency reassessment of every Iranian ballistic system that has been similarly underestimated. If the FA-360's terminal accuracy and salvo doctrine are indicative of the design philosophy applied across Iran's missile inventory, then the threat calculus for every American base, every Allied facility, and every naval asset operating within range of Iranian launch platforms needs to be fundamentally revised. That reassessment is happening right now in classified spaces in Washington, London, and Tel Aviv. The conclusions being reached are not comfortable. Within hours of the Nevada strikes, the White House Situation Room was operating at maximum density. The National Security Council convened an emergency session. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs was on secure video link with CENTCOM headquarters in Qatar. The Secretary of State was working the phones to every Gulf partner simultaneously. And from all of that frantic activity, what emerged in the public space was a statement expressing deep concern, reaffirming America's commitment to Israel's security, calling on all parties to exercise restraint. Restraint, the word landed in Tel Aviv like a second strike. To understand the depth of Washington's paralysis in this moment, you have to understand the operational problem that the Fath strike has created for American military planners. Not just politically, but in pure military terms. The standard American response playbook to a major Iranian escalation involves a sequence of steps. First, demonstrate overwhelming air power presence through carrier strike group positioning and bomber deployments to the region. Show the flag. Remind the adversary of the full weight of American military capability. Second, present Iran with a credible threat of devastating retaliation against its own military infrastructure. Make it clear that crossing a line will come at an unacceptable cost. Third, use that threat to compel de-escalation through diplomatic back channels. Give the adversary a path to stand down without losing face. Fourth, if diplomacy fails, execute precision strikes against Iranian military assets that degrade capability without triggering a full regional war. Every step in that playbook now faces a complication that did not exist 48 hours ago. Step 1. Demonstrating air power presence requires moving carrier strike groups into operational range. But the repositioning of American carriers away from the Gulf of Oman in recent days following the demonstration of Iranian anti-ship missile capability means that the nearest American carrier, Aviation, is currently operating from standoff distances that significantly reduce the tempo and volume of strike missions it can generate. Moving carriers back into the Gulf requires accepting a risk level that American Naval Command has just explicitly demonstrated it is not comfortable accepting. Step 2. Presenting a credible retaliation threat requires that Iran believes the threat will be executed. But Iran's behavior last night, striking 40 F-35s inside hardened shelters at the most heavily defended airbase in the Middle East, reflects a leadership calculation that American retaliation will be constrained by exactly the factors that are now visibly constraining it. Thrawn's decision to execute last night's strike was itself a statement. They do not believe Washington's retaliation threat will be unlimited. Step 3. Diplomatic back channels require a partner that perceives itself to be in a disadvantage at its position and is therefore motivated to negotiate. Iran this morning is not in that position. Iran this morning controls the momentum of the conflict. Step 4. Precision strikes against Iranian military assets runs directly into the question that American planners have been unable to answer cleanly for years. What do you hit? Iran's missile forces are dispersed across mobile platforms and hardened underground facilities distributed across a vast national territory. A precision strike campaign against Iranian missile infrastructure would need to be massive in scale and sustained in duration to achieve meaningful degradation. Massive and sustained means escalation. Escalation means Iran activates the full spectrum of its regional network simultaneously. Hezbollah, Houthi forces, Iraqi militia groups, and that means a regional war of a scale and complexity that American military planners running their models honestly cannot guarantee a favorable outcome within an acceptable cost envelope. This is the genuine source of Washington's paralysis. It is not political weakness. It is the recognition that the military options available have costs attached to them that no administration can absorb without consequence. The emergency resupply question compounds the problem. Israel has lost 40 F-35. The United States Air Force's total F-35 inventory globally is approximately 450 aircraft. Transferring replacement aircraft to Israel at the speed the situation demands would require pulling from active operational squadrons, reducing American air combat capability in other theaters simultaneously. The production rate new F-35 SSS, while the fastest in the program's history, cannot fill a 40-aircraft gap in anything less than several years of normal delivery scheduling. And there is a question that no one in official Washington is willing to ask publicly, but every defense analyst is asking privately. But every defense analyst, if NATOM can be struck with this accuracy and this density, what does that imply about the vulnerability of American air bases in the region? And Al-Udeid in Qatar, Al-Dhafra in the UAE, in Sorlik in Turkey. These are not hardened facilities built to absorb the kind of concentrated precision ballistic strike that Iran executed last night. They are conventional air bases operating in the open, with known coordinates against an adversary that has just demonstrated it can hit a specific aircraft shelter bay at a range of over 000 km. The silence from the Pentagon on this question is itself an answer. The Gulf states are watching Washington's response with extraordinary attention. Every Gulf monarchy that has built its security architecture on the assumption of American military primacy is conducting an emergency reassessment. Saudi Arabia, which has been pursuing its own quiet diplomatic channel to Tran, is reading last night's events as confirmation that the accommodation track deserves acceleration. The UAE, which hosts American military facilities, is calculating the degree to which hosting those facilities now makes its own territory a potential target in a way that it was not previously. Qatar, which has balanced its relationship with Washington against its own regional calculations, is recalibrating. The geopolitical ground is shifting beneath American regional policy at a speed that the institutional machinery of American foreign policy is not built to match. And in the middle of this stands Israel facing a reckoning that goes far deeper than the loss of 4 Thai aircraft. For 75 years, Israeli security doctrine rested on a single unshakable pillar: absolute air supremacy. The ability to strike anywhere in the region at any time with precision and impunity was not merely a military capability. It was the psychological foundation of Israeli deterrence. The guarantee that no adversary, regardless of how many rockets they stockpiled or fighters they recruited, could impose a cost that Israel could not repay with overwhelming force delivered from the sky. Last night, that pillar was struck at its base. 40 F-35s destroyed represents approximately 60% of Israel's operational Adder fleet. A $4 billion loss that no defense budget can absorb overnight, leaving the nation waking up without an offensive air force for the first time since its founding. While Washington finds itself trapped in a strategic paralysis where every military option carries catastrophic escalation risk, and the Gulf states begin quietly recalculating whether the American security umbrella still offers the protection they once assumed it did. And in Tehran, as the smoke rises over the Negev, the leadership understands something that will redefine the Middle East for decades to come. The old rules are finished. Iran has demonstrated to every government on earth that genuine strategic self-reliance is not just a moral aspiration, but a military capability that a nation can endure 5 decades of maximum pressure and emerge not broken, but hardened, not isolated, but self-sufficient, and that the era of uncontested Western military primacy, the era that began with the Gulf War in 1991 and reached its peak with the invasion of Iraq in 2003, has now crossed a threshold from gradual decline to decisive collapse. A new Middle East is being born, and its architecture will not be designed in Washington or imposed through American military superiority. It will be demonstrated they possess genuine agency over their own security environments, with Iran having earned a seat at that table, not through diplomatic courtesy, but through capability demonstration in a world that is now more genuinely multipolar, more complex, less predictable, and built on a more honest foundation. The foundation of real power, real self-determination, and the undeniable truth that what happened last night at Nevada Air Base was not simply a military engagement, but a historical sentence written in fire across the negative desert, declaring that the old rules of the Middle Eastern power game have been permanently replaced. Make sure you're subscribed and hit the like button. It genuinely helps more people find this coverage.